Publicly, Democrats and Republicans are sticking to their guns, but are there, in fact, behind-the-scenes negotiations taking place? For more on that, let's turn to Major Garret, a congressional correspondent for the National Journal. He's in our Washington bureau. Major, good morning to you.
Good morning, Russ.
Given the urgency of this situation, what do you think? Are lawmakers talking on the phone this weekend, trying to hammer out a deal?
Well, there might be some talks, Russ, but I don't think this is going to be a particularly productive weekend for these negotiations. They've gone about as far as they can go. The White House and congressional Democrats have agreed to about, depending on how you add everything together and which columns you put the savings in, up to $2 trillion in savings from current budget allocations over the next 10 years. But to get to that $2 trillion, they require $400 billion in new tax increases. Republicans, to this point, simply will not go there. And everyone's position is not softening, it's hardening. The differences are getting deeper, Russ. They're not getting calmer. So even though the Senate's coming back next week, what's on the agenda is not budget talks, it's Libya.
Right.
And Senate Republicans say they're going to even filibuster attempt to talk about Libya so they can talk about their own debt and deficit plans, but those plans that some of the congressional Republicans have in the Senate can't pass the Senate, so we're going to have some more talk. But I still think intense stalemate. Well,
Major, let me ask you this. Democratic sources close to the negotiations are saying that July 22nd is actually the drop-dead deadline. You've covered Washington for a long time. Can you get anything done in Congress in 3 weeks?
Well, look, the practical matter is this, Russ. If they don't have something next week that at least they can announce and begin working through the system and let all members, House and Senate, begin to digest, I don't even think July 22nd is realistic, because you're going to need at least a week in the Senate. And I would say a week and a half or 2 weeks for the House to deal with this. I would say we are almost already up against a practical deadline to move an enormous debt and deficit reduction package. If something as smaller is done, maybe that it just has some spending cuts that allows this debt crisis to be averted for 2 or 3 months, that seems to me doable. But a big deal, I think we're up against the deadline already.
Major, let me ask you from a political standpoint, who has the most to lose if the debt ceiling is not raised?
Well, I wrote in a column this week at National Journal that everyone says there are grave consequences if there's a debt crisis and the markets tumble and people lose investment savings and value. Well, grave right now, Russ, is an adjective, but it's going to be a noun for one party or another if this really does fall apart and there's a debt crisis. And that'll be decided in the 2012 election. Both will position, but the voters will finally decide. Was it Republicans' intransigence on taxes or the president's unwillingness to compromise and get a deal? We don't know that yet. Both sides believe they can win, and when both sides believe they can win, they fight to the end, but the end may be pretty ugly.
Busy days and weeks ahead. Major Garret of National Journal. Thanks so much. We appreciate it.